Welcome everyone to Poetry Notes number 2. This section of our notes is going to cover all of the figurative language pages in our poetry booklet, starting with the alliteration page. Alliteration is a figurative language technique, which means, again, you do not have to take it literally. It is something that makes our writing more exciting and more fun to read, but it doesn't always mean exactly what it says. Alliteration is when you repeat the same beginning consonant You repeat that beginning consonant sound in nearby words. Okay. For example, at the bottom of your page, cold caribou cry constantly in Canada. We are repeating this C sound. Cold caribou cry constantly in Canada. All these words are nearby, and we're repeating a sound at the beginning of the word. She sells seashells by the seashore. Again, at the beginning of the word. You could also count the S for shells and the S for shore. Tongue twisters use a lot of alliteration a lot of the time. In Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, there's a lot of the P consonant sound. Peter Piper picked peck of pickled peppers, etc. This is why we call them tongue twisters, because we have so much alliteration in such a short space. The next one is hyperbole. Hyperbole is when we use exaggeration for emphasis or effect. E-X-A-G-G-E-R-A-T-I-O-N. Remember from learning our roots, hyper means over or above. Well, we are exaggerating something. We are going over and above what it actually was for effect. For example, the books weighed a ton. That part is bolded for a reason. Weighed a ton. The books really did not weigh as much as an elephant or as much as a car. In fact, maybe they weighed a few pounds, but to us they were really, really heavy. Instead of saying the books were really, really heavy, we're going to overemphasize it. We're going to make a hyperbole and said they weighed a ton. In this poem, this is a section of a poem from I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud by William Wordsworth. There's a section here that is a hyperbole. They stretch in never-ending line. Well, we're talking about stars here. Stars that shine, stars that twinkle in the Milky Way. The stars really do end at some point. But to the poet, they seem like they're stretching in a never-ending line. He's over-exaggerating how long this line of stars are. 10,000 I saw at a glance. He probably saw more than 10,000 or less than 10,000. He didn't count 10,000 right at once, so he's exaggerating. Alright, the next one is idioms. We learn about idioms every week. That is part of our weekly warm-up on Wednesdays. Idioms, as you know, are words or phrases that are not to be taken literally. That means that they have a separate meaning from what the dictionary definition of the words really are. For example, sick as a dog. If I'm sick as a dog, it means I'm really, really sick. I'm very ill. It does not mean I've suddenly turned into a dog and am now sick. If you jump the gun, you are not jumping over a gun. Instead, it means you're doing something early. You're getting ahead of other people. Once in a blue moon means something occurs very rarely. There's a phenomenon called a blue moon when you have 2 full moons in the same month, and that's what this idiom is based off of. We've talked about raining cats and dogs before. We know that cats and dogs do not literally fall from the sky. Instead, when we say raining cats and dogs, it means that it's raining very heavily right now. And when you tell somebody to break a leg before a performance, you're not actually telling them to break their own leg. That would be gruesome and horrible. Instead, you are wishing them good luck. Metaphors. Metaphors are hard. This is probably the hardest type of figurative language that we'll talk about. With a metaphor, you are comparing two unlike things by saying that one thing is the other thing. Keyword here is. Okay? We all know about comparing and contrasting. However, when we use a metaphor, we are comparing in such a way that we are saying that one item is the other one. Not it's similar to, or it's just like this one. No, it is the other thing. For example, the homework was a breeze. Homework is a breeze. As we know, homework is not a phenomenon that happens in the wind that blows around us. Instead, it is a piece of paper or an activity for you to do. Homework is not literally a breeze. However, we say this phrase to show the comparison between the two. If we say homework was a breeze, we mean it was very easy. It flew by us. It was very quick. I wish you weren't always such a chicken. Well, here we're comparing you to a chicken. I can look at each one of you and tell right away that you are not a chicken. You do not have feathers, you do not have a beak. Therefore, you cannot take this sentence literally. It does not mean what the dictionary says it means. Instead, it means you were scared. The kids at that school are all brains. Here we're comparing kids and brains. You are not simply a brain sitting in a chair at a desk. Instead, we are comparing brains to kids and saying that these kids are like a brain, that is, they're very smart. My boyfriend is my knight in shining armor. Here we're comparing boyfriend and knight. Now, I don't see anybody walking around these days in shining armor, riding a horse, boyfriend or not. So we're comparing these two things and saying the boyfriend is like a knight, but we're using this keyword is. Anytime you see the keyword is or are, it's going to be a metaphor. But as you can see, not all metaphors have those keywords. Cells are bricks in a wall. Cells are bricks. One is the other thing. Love is a chocolate fountain that never runs out. Love is a fountain made of chocolate. Okay? I love my husband. I love my daughter. But I do not pour chocolate over them. Okay? That would be weird. Love is a chocolate fountain means that love is overflowing and it's very sweet and it's very, very tasty. Metaphors are tricky. We will do some practice in class where we are able to pick out metaphors from a poem and figure out what they mean. Nonsense words. This is one of the most fun types of figurative language, I think. Nonsense words are words that are made up. They're fantasy words. They don't exist. These words make no sense by themselves, but in a poem, they add a creative meaning. You cannot find these words in the dictionary. They are made up. Lewis Carroll in Alice in Wonderland made up a lot of nonsense words for the poem Jabberwocky. Here's the first stanza from this poem. I'll read it out loud and see if you can pick out any of the nonsense words. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves and the momrass outgrabe. Wow. Thankfully I know how to read English, otherwise I wouldn't even be able to pronounce some of these words. They don't exist. Brillig is a made-up word. Slithy is a made-up word. Toves is a made-up word. Gyre, gimble, wave, mimsy, borogoves, mome, outgrabe, and some people even count wrasse as a made-up word. That's a lot of made-up words. Makes the poem really fun to say, and it adds a lot of creativeness to the story, but we're using a lot of nonsense words. Dr. Seuss is another person who used a lot of nonsense words in his poems, even though the poems still make sense. Onomatopoeia. This is probably going to be one of your favorites, but it doesn't show up very often in poems. Onomatopoeia is a word that resembles the sound it represents. For example, here's a poem by Lee Emmett. Remember, in poetry, anything goes, so it doesn't have to have capital letters, it doesn't have to have punctuation. Water plops into pond, splish splash downhill, warbling magpies in trees, trilling melodic thrill. Whoosh, passing breeze, flags flutter and flap, frog croaks, bird whistles, babbling bubbles from tap. This is a poem all about water, and it has some onomatopoeia in here. Plops is a word that is also a sound. Splish splash, a word that is also a sound. Whoosh, a word that is also a sound. Croak, a word that is also a sound. Okay? Some people will count whistles, babbling, warbling, trilling as well. But these four are definitely onomatopoeia. They are a word that is also a sound. In fact, you might want to write that down. A word that is also a sound. I might ask you to list some onomatopoeia on a test or on a quiz. All you have to do is think of words that are sounds. Oxymoron. Sounds like a fun word, and it is pretty fun. Oxymorons are short phrases that pair two normally opposite terms. You could also put the word contradictory in that line. A short phrase that pairs two normally contradictory terms. For example, that building is a little bit big and pretty ugly. Well, how can something be little and big at the same time? Think about it. It really can't, which means we cannot take that phrase literally because it cannot happen in real life. So it's some sort of explanation of or description of that building. We have to think beyond the dictionary here. If the building is a little bit big, that means it's bigger than some things, but not other buildings. The building is also pretty and ugly at the same time. You cannot be pretty and ugly at the same time. You can be one or the other, but you can't be both. When we say something is pretty ugly, we mean that it's super ugly, but we use the word pretty. That's an oxymoron. No one goes into that restaurant anymore. It's always too crowded. If nobody is in the restaurant, why is it crowded? Oxymoron. Opposites. A business that makes nothing but money is a poor business. If your business is making lots of money, how can it be poor? Well, Mr. Ford was implying that it's a poor business because it's not thinking about other aspects of business, customer service, the different values of a business. It's only focused on money. He used an oxymoron to say that because he's using an opposite to get his point across. And the last one, I like a smuggler. He's the only honest thief. If you're a thief, you can't be honest. We use an oxymoron here to describe this person's point of view on a smuggler. He's saying that he's the only thief you can trust to do something a certain way. You can't trust him with your stuff, but you can trust that he's going to smuggle if he's a smuggler. The next one is personification. And the words you need to notice in this title is person. If you can remember the person in personification, you will be good. Personification is giving human emotions actions, thoughts, or feelings to inanimate objects. Inanimate means not living. So we might give a rock the emotions of a human. We might give a plant feelings. Basically, you're giving the attributes of a person to something that's not a person. You're making something not a person into a person. For example, the teddy bear sat slumped on the bed, looking sadly at its feet. A teddy bear cannot be sad. It doesn't happen. That would be a fantasy story. However, we are saying that the teddy bear is being sad just like a person would be sad. She did not realize that opportunity was knocking at her door. Opportunity is an idea. It is not a concrete object. It cannot physically knock at the door. Honda, the car company, has used this kind of personification in their commercials. They have a Mr. Opportunity, a cartoon character that comes around and knocks at people's doors, saying that Honda has a great deal in store for them. However, opportunity itself could never ever do that. It is a thought. The words appeared to leap off the paper as she read the story. Well, something's leaping. What's leaping? The words. Can words normally leap off of a page? No. They are inanimate. They don't move. We are giving words personification. We are personifying them by saying that they leap off the paper. Repetition. Repetition is very, very easy. This should not be a figurative language that you get incorrect. Repetition is when words or phrases are repeated. Very easy. You repeat something. For example, this is a line from Macbeth. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day. The word tomorrow repeats 3 times. The word day repeats twice. Things repeat. I've also given you 2 examples of longer poems, The Highwayman and The Owl and the Pussycat. In both of these poems, if you look them up, there are big chunks of the poem that repeat. Maybe a chorus repeats, or a whole stanza repeats, but big chunks repeat. Repetition is also very prominent in different songs. Sensory images. Using the senses of sight, smell, hearing, touch, and taste to create vivid pictures in your mind. As you read the poem, if they're using words that describe how something looks, how something smells, how something sounds, how something feels, or how something tastes, they're using sensory images, using your 5 senses to create a picture inside your mind. For example, magnified apples appear and disappear, every fleck of russet showing clear. Russet is a color. Something showing means you're looking at it. Appearing and disappearing, you're noticing that with your eyes. So this example is using the sense of sight to create a picture in your mind. Essence of winter sleep in on the night, the scent of apples. Key word here, scent. We're talking about how apples smell. So the second example is all about the smell. Robert Frost here is using sensory images to create pictures in your head all about apples. Alright, last one, simile. It looks like smile, but it has an extra I in it. Simile is very easy. You can smile when you do similes because they're easy to remember. Similes, you are comparing 2 unlike things, just like a metaphor, but there are key words. Like or as. A simile will always, always, always have one of these two words. The clouds looked like cotton candy. Here's my key word, like. What is being compared? The clouds and cotton candy. Clouds are like cotton candy. Fluffy, fluffy, fluffy. Hopefully you don't have to taste them. Arthur was fast like a gazelle. What is being compared? A gazelle and Arthur. We're saying that Arthur is like a gazelle. How? Because he's fast. The darkness falls from the wings of night as a feather is wafted down from an eagle in his flight. Where's our key word? Like or as. In this case, it's as. This is a longer simile, but we still have to find out what we are comparing. In this case, darkness is being compared to a feather. Darkness falls, just like a feather falls down from a flying eagle. Yay, we're done talking about figurative language. Make sure you have everything I wrote down. If you need to go back and watch something again, please do that. We will talk about this more on Tuesday when we get to language arts class.